Hello and welcome to the Large and Unnecessary First Player Token podcast. This is episode 80. My name is Chris.
I'm Euan.
I'm David.
Where's Pawel?
Pawel doesn't play board games.
Actually, I think he missed the last board games episode as well.
He's not interested.
I think he's actually just not interested anymore.
Yeah. I mean, when his foe sort of hurt over like, oh, you didn't play it with me. He's not bothered really.
Also just going on about how much he wants to talk about RPGs, and we're giving him a chance to do it, but he's never here.
That's true. Yeah.
He can come in and play talk about some RPGs anytime he wants.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If he could be bothered turning up. Nah, only joking, Pawel. We love you, really. We don't know where you are. We think it's your birthday today. Is that right? Is it Pawel's birthday?
I think it might be.
What is he, about 59 now or something?
Something like that.
Still looks about 20.
59 in Polish years.
He's rosy cheeks.
He's got a laddish complexion.
Okay, so we're keeping the promise we made in the last episode. We're going to talk about some board games this week. It's been a wee while. I think was that about 4 or 5 episodes ago we last talked about board games. Mm-hmm. But we managed to get some stuff played over the weekend. We've played a couple of new things. We've played something that we've talked about before, but it was that long ago that we talked about it. We think this was one of the early episodes.
It feels like an age since I've even played it, to be honest.
Well, that's true, aye. So we're going to talk about that again, because we feel it is worth revisiting. It's that good a game. But first up, we're going to talk about a game by Stefan Feld, who is a well-known designer in the board game world, but he's well known for making very point-salady Euro games, and this is exactly what this game is. So it's Bora Bora we played. It's a game that I've had sitting around. Like, I bought it. How long ago did I buy this game, Euan? It must have been about 2 years ago.
I feel like this might have been around the entire time we've been doing this podcast.
It's very possible. I think I bought it when... I think it was about 2 years ago.
Right.
I don't think I was living here.
No,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
We've come close to playing it so many times.
Yes,
it's one of the games that's like skirted just about being played, and somehow we've avoided it.
It always seems to get suggested whenever we've got 5 people. And we can't play it with 5 people.
Right.
It's only 2 to 4. Everybody, as soon as we've got a room with 5 people in it, somebody goes, "Let's play Bora Bora." I'm like, we can.
Well, if it wasn't Bora Bora, it'd be some other game that you can't play with 5 people.
So this game, it came out in 2013, right? And now it's the same year that another Stefan Feld game came out that I own, which is Amerigo.
Amerigo?
You remember Amerigo, Euan? Oh, come on, you must remember Amerigo. You love that game.
I'm struggling.
It has the cube tower and little islands that you put on your board. And
yes, I'm getting it mixed up with Goa.
There's so many Euro games.
I've got Euro Heat Crunch.
You're a big Euro game fan, Euan.
I know.
This is your preferred genre.
I would say it is. I think I take to them for whatever reason more than I take to other games.
I think because you win them quite a lot.
I do. Well, I think only the first time out of blind luck. I actually really enjoyed this one. It's got a cool theme. I quite like it's a unique theme.
What is the theme? I've often wondered.
It's sort of like Polynesian island general society.
Yeah, so you're kind of... I think the idea is that you're kind of building up a little tribe.
Yeah.
So the board is just basically... It's one big central island and there's 4 small islands around the outside of the board. And you have a little... You have your own player board and you have a bunch of little huts of your colour. And you start in one of these spaces in the island, and the idea being that you're expanding out, you're going into other spaces in the islands, you're taking a resource every time you do that, and you are building up your little tribe essentially. So you're filling up your tribe with both men and women, who then that's important that there is a difference in this game between the two. And you can then do various things, and it's very point salady. There's so many ways of getting points in this game, and in a lot of cases that can be quite overwhelming in some games, where you're just kind of like, it's so hard to keep track of what's going on, and it is still hard to keep track of what's going on in this game. But I felt that this game was quite a bit more straightforward than other games, in terms of like, you can see where your points are going to come from.
Yeah,
for the most part.
There are a lot of different sort of ways of getting them, but yeah, it's one of the things we always find this with Euro games. They can be quite. This one in particular, when we were sort of going through the rules and attempting to kind of work out what we were supposed to be doing, I really struggled to understand what you were explaining to me. A lot of it didn't click till about the second or third round of the game.
Yeah,
but that's quite common with these kind of games.
It is. I think once we got started playing it, because I was reading the rules and I was a bit like, not really sure what's going on. But once you get started with it, it's actually quite straightforward. And I don't think we really needed to refer back to the rules that much, other than just to find out, okay, which bit do we do next?
Yeah.
But there was once you got a grasp of the rules, there was no dubiousness or anything about what was going on. It was fairly straightforward once you got past that first round. You're like, okay, right, I see how this stuff works.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to continue with like the explanation of what's going on, you have some dice. You have a player board in front of you, which has, and it's this is one of the things about this game, is that this player board has so much stuff on it, like in terms of the spaces and stuff that are on it, that it can be overwhelming. Yeah. Just that player board on its own, because there's a space for everything on this player board. They leave nothing out. But I mean, it does become quite straightforward. There's some action tiles at the side of the board, and these determine what you can actually do in your round. This is where you're putting your dice. You put your dice in, that tells you which action you're taking, and then sometimes the number on the. In fact, I think in pretty much all cases, the number on the dice is important. It determines what you can do with that action. There are also the men and women tiles. You can get those through using one of the actions. There are god cards, which let you do. They're basically like what we call rule breaking cards almost. They're like, you play one of these god cards to do something that you wouldn't normally be able to do, or to change a die or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's quite common in this game to find yourself up against, just not being able to complete a certain thing, or you get tasks every round that you have to complete.
Yes.
Gods that help you with that. There's certain gods that will help you take an action you might not necessarily have been able to take. It's just to give you like a bit of flexibility. I mean, with the dice, the way the worker placement thing works is quite interesting.
Yeah, and that was one of the things. Like, the reason I bought this game is because I like Euro games that use dice. Now, generally, that's a weird thing for me to say, right? When I started buying Euro games, back when I first started getting my board game collection back in, what are we talking about, 2005 or something like that? When I first started off, one of the first things I bought was Power Grid and Puerto Rico were two. Now, Puerto Rico in particular was like, that was the game that amazed me about when it came to sort of these styles of games. I'd never seen anything like this before in my life. Yeah. Like, Puerto Rico, the only random element in Puerto Rico is the harvest tiles or whatever they are. Because you've got the corn and you've got the coffee and you've got the indigo or whatever it is. You've got all these little tiles. That's the only random element, but even then they offset that because there's 4 different stacks of them, or 4 or 5 different stacks of them. So you generally, there's something there that you want to take, but everything in Puerto Rico is just run. There's no random chance. There's no dice roll to see if you do this or do that, or get this much of that, or get whatever. And it blew my mind. Like, that was the mind-blowing thing about these games. I was like I didn't think that was possible, to make a game that was so, like, the players decide what happens rather than some random chance. Now, Bora Bora, when I bought this, the thing that attracted me to it was the fact that it used dice. Yeah. And I was like, Euro games that use dice are, like, I've had some very good experiences with them. Stuff like Waggle Dance is a brilliant game that uses dice. Yeah. There was something else. Well, What was one of the other ones we mentioned
I mean,
earlier
we
on?
mentioned the other day, obviously, we talked about Stone Age.
Stone Age,
I
yes.
mean, it's not a massive part of that, but they're in there and it does affect the game.
I think that's
Whatever, yeah.
I think it's a huge part in Stone Age. In fact, your tribe can live or die depending on how much you roll on these dice sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I saw this game and it's got dice in it, and the game's colourful as well. It's not like dreary or anything like that. Like for example, Puerto Rico can look a bit bland. It has some muted colours in it.
In hindsight, I've not played it for a while, but yeah,
It is an older game.
Yeah.
So you can forgive it that. But yeah, this game looks it's colourful. You've got your reds and greens and blue huts depending on the players, and the dice are the same colours, and the tiles are all sort of nice colourful things. And yeah, they using the dice. Like when I read up about how the dice are used in this game, that it really attracted me to it because it's worker placement with dice, similar to Waggle Dance and that kind of thing. And all you're doing with your dice is you've got a bunch of action tiles at the side of the board. They, like I say, they let you take a man, they let you take a woman, they let you take a god card. They let you can expand out by building a new part of the island. You can do I can't remember what it was called, this action. Where is it? Here it is. The helper action, yeah. Yes. And you can build. Now, building is a weird thing in this game. I think that's the most abstract part of this game. There's almost like a little weird puzzle thing going on in the centre of your player board where you've just got these little building tiles. So building isn't actually expanding on the islands. It's just building a little building, which is just a tile that you've got at the side of your player board.
Is it not called something that's like ceremonial?
Oh no, it's just called building.
It's buildings. Oh, right, no, I thought there was something else.
I mean, the helper action is a weird action as well.
It lets you do quite a lot.
It lets you do a bunch of stuff, and it's quite an important action as well. Because when you're taking your men and your women tiles, these tiles have, in true point salad style, they have a bunch of different things on them. Including like the men have a bunch of tattoo symbols on them, the women have a bunch of shells on them. They also have little bonus things that you get, but you don't get to use those until a certain phase of the game. And so you take these things, and then when you take the helper tile, that's when you can tattoo your men. And you can send your women out to pick up shells. But you can only do it once with each man and woman tile. So once you've done it, that's it. You can't tattoo a man multiple times. Which I, for some reason, found the idea of that hilarious. Just like, your man gets tattooed once and that's it.
Yeah, he retires and he's done.
Yeah, that's it, he's done. It's like, I've done my hard work.
He's an
for
elder.
the day. I've got my tattoos. But yeah, doing these things, like, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail about what these things actually do, but I mean, the shells you can use to pay for jewellery at the end of every round. There's jewellery, and the jewellery is just straight up points. So if you really focus on just picking up loads of women tiles and then sending them out to pick up loads of shells, you can then buy the best jewellery every round. Yeah. True point salad form, there's a way of getting your points. But then if you get your men tattooed, you can move up on the status marker. Every round you look at that status track, and then that determines who goes the first player next round, but it also gives you some points. Not as much as getting the jewellery can do, though. Like, you'd have to tattoo multiple men in one round in order to get the same amount of points as you would get just from spending the shells that the women get.
I thought that was quite an interesting sort of mechanic to have in it, because it altered the player order at the end of the turn. You know, whoever was highest on that prestige, or what was it called?
Status track. Sorry,
Status,
I was having a mouthful of tea there.
That was a good time to ask you that. I kept calling it prestige throughout the game because I think that was in another game. And
that's in every game.
Yeah, it's like prestige. That was I found that quite interesting, because like I did certain things like that where in the start of the game I kind of got screwed over a lot on that, where I wasn't getting around to using the helper action, which lets you tattoo people, which then gives you the status on that round, because your status goes back, everybody goes back to 0 at the end of the round, and then it's the turn orders depending on what order you're going in. And I just I found that really interesting, the way that it kind of you could sort of, I sort of comboed it later in the game where I was like, okay, I've got suddenly the opportunity to actually, all these guys that are sitting there untattooed, suddenly I can just hammer as many of them as I feel like, and I'm boosting myself up the track and got quite a lot of points doing that. I just thought it was like a very flexible system for earning them.
Yeah, I mean, point salady games, I mean, they do get they get kind of, I don't know, some people criticise them for just being like, well, you get points for doing everything. But like, I think in this game, it kind of works. Like, and it's not, because like you say, you can start comboing things, but it's not like, you know, there are particular moves that you can make that will give you maximum points and stuff like that, because it comes down to the dice rolls. Like, the dice are really important, like I say, because the numbers on the dice, they do two things. One of them is that if you place your die on an action card that has nothing on it, then that's fine. But if somebody else wants to use that action, they have to place equal to or lower than that. So if you've rolled a bunch of sixes, that's not necessarily a good thing when it comes to... Because if somebody puts a 1 on one of those action cards, screwed.
Yeah.
Like, unless you've got one of these god cards which breaks the game and then lets you do it. But the other thing that the dice do is that the higher you've rolled on them, the more choice you have in terms of what you can do. So, for example, there are always 6 man tiles and 6 woman tiles on the board, but they're numbered 1 to 6. If you put a 6 on there, you can take any one of those. Like, put a 6 on, say, the woman tile. You can take any one of the women. If you've only put like a 3 on, then you can only take one of the first 3. And it becomes important because, like, when you use the helper action, you get a certain amount of points that you can spend. The helper actions, like, there's 1 point actions and there's 2 point actions when you take the helper action. They're like tattooing and collecting shells is 1 point things, but then you can also just take victory points. You can make offerings to... you can take offerings from the supply, which you need to play the god cards. You can take god cards, and you can also, like, take building materials and various things like that. There's just so many things that you can do, but you can only use the points that you've got on your dice that you've rolled. So putting a 6 on the helper action gives you, you know, a lot of choice. You could tattoo multiple men. You could take bunches of god cards. You could just take points for it. That kind of thing. It's the same when you're expanding, when you're moving from one island region to another, putting a new hut in. These spaces in between, there's like travel paths, and they have dice numbers on them. So you can only cross one of those things if you've rolled a certain number or higher. So there's a little sort of two-sided thing there. So putting a high number in early is good for you if you want to spend all the points, but you're also leaving the space open for other people, because if you've put a 6 on there, anybody can put a die on there after you. Yeah. If you put a 2 on it in the first round of the game, you're really screwing other people over from trying to use those things. But again, like I say, the god cards can affect that as well.
Well, it mitigates it as well, because you can sort of go full on kind of, right, okay, I'm going to be really aggressive here, and I'm going to place 1s and 2s on all the crests. But then you do that, you're kind of knackering yourself. Yeah. Because, again, as you mentioned, you're limiting your own choices with what you can do with them, but you're also potentially stopping other people from taking that action at all. There's an interesting kind of like dynamic there.
Yeah, I really like that, actually. There was a couple of times that Euan, when we're playing...
Euan was playing hardball.
He was playing hardball, aye. It didn't work for him.
No. But that's what I came to see, and because I had the situation you described there on 2 of the rounds where I rolled 3 6s, but I was able to find a way around it in both. I was more successful in the later one because I got to grips with the game a bit better. But you start to appreciate the design of the game when something like that happens, particularly in these kind of point salad games where you think, oh, it's all over the place, but it doesn't necessarily need to be an engine building game, or you kind of adapt to whatever you're doing at the time. That's what I find interesting about those kind of games.
In fact, that's an interesting point, actually, because there isn't really an engine building aspect to this Euro game at all, really. There are things that you can do, because the man and the woman tiles, at the end of every round, you get to use 1 man and 1 woman special action that's on their thing, and you can start comboing those and things, but you don't really build an engine as such, which I find quite interesting. The other aspect of the game, actually, which is actually really important and we've not really mentioned it, was the task tiles. You did mention it earlier, but I feel that the task tiles, everybody starts the game with 3 of those things, at the end of every single round, you can try and complete one of them, and it just has a bunch of requirements on it. And it might just say, you need 4 offering tiles just to own them, not turn them in, or you need to have like a man and a woman that both have this symbol on, or something like that. And those really focus your efforts, because I found that I was really looking at what my task tiles were and saying, right, so I started the game with a bunch of task tiles, and like 3 task tiles, and 2 of them were to do with the women tiles. So I was like, right, I'm focusing my entire game on the women. Then I'm just going to start getting as many women out as possible, and trying to build them up, because I think one of the first task tiles I started with, I needed to have like 4 women or something like that, or 3 women possibly.
Yeah, I think you had that quite early
because I just went, right, just give me all these women then, and then it worked out for me, because I was you get to use their special abilities. I was collecting shells, which was letting me buy jewellery, but that was just one aspect of the game, because your strategy at the beginning of the game was just being, you were being a religious man, weren't you?
That just happened to be because again, I was I wasn't able to take certain actions, and I thought, well, what does this do? Let's have a go. And then I realised how useful it was, and it kept
going for the gods. Yeah.
And that really worked out for me, because you get points for having more priests knocking about in the temple. We found that quite amusing, the idea that basically there's like a track there, so you've got 6 spaces, and you put your priests out, and once there's 6, or say you've got a priest on the 1 space, and somebody else rolls a 1, and that's what they're using to put their priest out, it's going to knock you off the board. Similarly, if all spaces are filled, any one is going to knock something off the board. So it's like the priests. There's too many priests in the temple. They're not like having a bit.
We're just talking about this tiny little temple. There's 6 priests in it, all shoving each other about. Like, get out! But yeah, for a game which is point salad, for a Stefan Feld game, and sometimes you can make games that are like eating a bucket of sand. They can be dry.
Yeah.
I actually quite enjoyed it.
I did as well.
I mean, I think it was a decent investment, and I'm glad that we finally got to play it, because I kind of had a feeling that I was going to enjoy this one. And it's like I say, it's colourful. It's not all about building engines and stuff. It's about dice rolls and deciding on at the time what you're going to do with those dice rolls, and that was one of the things that I really liked about it. The other thing about it was that, I mean, for our first game, we played a 3-player game. It took maybe about 2 hours with a couple of interruptions and stuff, and learning to play the game. So it didn't drag on at all. I mean, if we went back and played had a second go at it, I reckon we could have ploughed through it in an hour.
Aye. It felt like that even playing it. I think we were just taking our time, but I was looking at it, this could go very quickly.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about the outcome of this game, Euan?
What was the outcome of this game?
So halfway through the game, you realised that you cheated.
Oh, right, yeah, of course, aye. Yeah.
And then the final scores, I was 1 point behind you.
So there's a bit of contra talks about the who actually won this.
About who actually won.
But I felt
I'm taking the moral victory.
You can have the moral victory. I definitely, and again, this was just an experience with the game. Over rounds, every round, I think I noticed something I'd forgotten. Either I dropped points or I took points that I did. So there was all over the place. There were little things. But I mean, the thing that's actually striking me now as we talk about it, and was sort of creeping up when we played the game, is actually we talk about pace, the dawn theme. If you take it in its kind of abstract, it is quite a thematically strong game, because it's not necessarily.
No, it isn't, Euan.
I don't know. If you it's not. You're not like you say. There's no engine build. There's no this big industry to be a thing. So you've got the sort of survival aspect of okay, you get your people and they're getting on and doing things, and then you've also got the sort of daft, sort of primitive culture aspect of the religious side of things.
Sorry, no. Point salad games are.
It's just a point.
They're very much, pretty much all pasted on themes. I'm not seeing it at all. I think the theme is good for this game.
Yeah.
I think it works for this game. It's different. It's unique. I've never seen a game that does Polynesian settlers.
Yeah.
I
just don't know what you. I just don't know what you would apply that to.
Look,
otherwise,
people that make Euro games always find a way. They could probably make this a trading in the Mediterranean game if they really wanted to.
Do we have to?
But that is Bora Bora. That's by Stefan Feld, and that came out in 2013. Okay, Dave, you have been very, very silent. Sorry, do you want to actually come in on Bora Bora or anything? Do you want to?
No.
If you don't, then you can.
Can we note that Bora Bora, because we keep bringing this up, that Bora Bora is published by Ravensburger.
It is published by Ravensburger, yeah, and Alia, who are also the Puerto Rico company.
Oh, right.
No, I've been interested to hear about it because it's been out on the table so many times when I've been over, and
it's been put back in the shelf.
Yeah, we've never quite got around to play it, and I managed to miss out on it this time thanks to the crappy weather and whatnot. Maybe I'll be there for the rematch when you play it properly and Euan doesn't cheat.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I don't know. You say the theme sounds pasted on, and I'm sure it is, but as pasted on themes go, you were all, talking about it quite enthusiastically in the terms of the game that it uses. With like tattoos and shells and priests and.
I think the thing with like Euro games is that they can be really lazy with the themes, and I think that this was inspired. Kind of, and it does make it, and because it makes you feel like you're playing something completely different from everything else when you're playing it with a theme that's completely different from all the other Euro games.
I'd be interested to play it. Does it feel quite strategic? I mean, how strategic does it feel, and how much is it making the most of what you've got at any given time?
I think, like I say, I think the task tiles were pushing me down certain avenues and sort of focusing my efforts in certain places. But the thing is, it does come down to what dice you roll, like what numbers you roll on the dice and where other people put their dice. So if you're going to have a long-term strategy, you might find that you're going to get upset because you can't stick to it as much as you would like to. So I'd say, I'd say more. It is more about just having a look at what the state of play is at that time and the best thing that you can do at that time.
Do you have to think? Do you have to second guess what other people are going to do, or does it benefit you?
There is some of that, yeah. There is some of that. There is some of like looking at what other people have rolled and then thinking about, well, what are they most likely to do now with their task tiles in front of them.
Well, the turn order kind of makes things a bit interesting because it's constantly shifting and little things sort of change.
Yeah.
There's an interesting thing where you mentioned about the jewels, the jewellery you get at the end, and you have a chance, everybody has a chance to buy one at the end of each round and you'll get points for it. The turn order changes before the end of the round. So certain things that you might apply, like if you're in first for the rest of the round, you're thinking, I'm going to do this. Suddenly you could be in third, and you're like, and you get everything poached in front of you, which is I find quite interesting.
Yeah, so like, the person that was last in that round could end up being the first person to buy the jewellery because they were higher up in the status track. Because you do that first before you buy the jewellery. You're right. But yeah, let's move on. We've talked about that for long enough. So yes, Dave, you've played a game which is very similar to some other games and games that I've played. And yeah, well, I'm sure you'll tell us the story about this. Go for it.
Well, I'm going to talk about it now. I've been playing Whitehall Mystery, which is a hidden movement game for 2 to 4 players, and a re-implementation of a game that most or many people will have heard of, which is Letters from Whitechapel. It's by the same guys, and it's I don't know how you would describe it. It's another version of the same game, as we'll see. Chris, you played Letters from Whitechapel a long time ago, you said.
I played it once and I only played two players.
Okay.
I don't think it worked very well with 2 players.
Well,
but I have played Scotland Yard.
Right, yep. And there are many other games that are very, very similar to this. A large number of them by the same 2 guys that have done Whitehall Mystery. Garibaldi was an older one, Letters from Whitechapel. There's one coming out, or is out this year, Hunt for the Ring, which is by by Gabriele Mari. He was involved with that as well. Not quite sure why they feel the need to make quite so many versions of this, but there we are. The way it works, it's a one versus many kind of hide and seeky type game, and it takes place on a map of London. One of the players has to be the protagonist, the evil villain of the game, and they're referred to as Jack.
They always are
in this game. Now, the Whitehall mystery is itself an actual historical unsolved murder case that is separate from the Ripper cases, or they don't believe that it was the same person, but for ease of reference, they still refer to them as Jack because it's just easier. So that's what I will be calling them, even though there's supposedly no connection. It's one of the Thames torso murders.
Oh,
quite exciting! You can read up. You can read up about it in Wikipedia. There's an interesting wee history to it. So one player becomes Jack, and the remaining players are the investigators. The game is for 2 to 4, but really, at its heart, it is kind of a 2-player game, and most of these games are, in the sense that there are 2 sides. And one side has to have 1 player on it, because they're the one doing the... Well, it doesn't have to, but generally that's how you do it. And then the other side, in theory, could have as few or as many players on it as you want, if you see what I mean. It's a bit like all of these... It's a bit like playing Codenames. Like, Codenames is a 2-player game, right. But we often play it with larger teams doing the guessing, and some people play it with huge numbers. So the remaining players take on the roles of the investigators. The game's played on a board which is a map of central London. This one has the board itself is it's an actual contemporary map that they've used, so it's quite nice looking. It's got a bit of the Thames on it, which you didn't get in Letters from Whitechapel. It's one of the new editions, and it's a little bit difficult to describe this in a way that people will be able to understand, but there's a network of roads on the map, and there's a grid. It's not a grid, but a network of lines that go along. They're like dotted lines that go along all of the roads. On each of the roads themselves, there is a numbered circle, and that's where Jack will be making his movements. And on the intersections of the roads, there are little squares, and that's where the investigators place their pieces.
Right.
That's an important mechanism, and it's shared with a lot of these guys' games. They use the same system, and the reason for that is because when the Jack player is moving around making their move, they cannot move through an investigator. So that's why they can't be on the same spaces, because there's this concept that you can't move through an investigator, so they can block the Jack player in and restrict their movement as they close in on them as the game takes place. So what you do if you're playing as Jack at the beginning in this one, you've got your little screen that you hide your wee bit of paper that you're going to annotate your moves on, and there's a little copy of the map on the back there so that the investigators can't see what you're looking at on the main board, because it might be a bit of a giveaway if you're kind of peering over at the main board. So you've got your own wee copy of the map to look at, and the first thing you have to do is choose 4 locations on this board, and you choose one in each of the 4 quadrants. The board's broken up into 4 squares, and you have to choose a circle in each of those. You note down the number, and those are the 4 locations, and then you choose one that's going to be your starting location. Okay, and you put a little red clear marker on top of it on the board so that the investigators can see where you're going to start. Actually, slightly before you do that, the investigators are supposed to place their 3 little policemen on one of the spots that they're allowed to start on. And then, so you put down your discovery location.
Can I just say
they
that
start
so far?
Yeah.
I think so far this is just identical to Scotland Yard, the way Scotland Yard starts and everything. I'm pretty sure there's a red clear marker. I'm pretty sure.
Well, the clear markers are a common one, so that you can see. I'm not super familiar with Scotland Yard, so it possibly may be right. Scotland Yard is very much a chase, and this is like a chase as well. Whereas Letters from Whitechapel is slightly different. Maybe we'll go back to that. But that's what you do. You put down your start marker. So immediately, that's where Jack is, and the investigators know where you are at the beginning of the game, but they're quite far away from you. They have to be placed near the centre, and you're going to be nearer the outskirts of the board. There's 3 rounds, and the way the turn sequence goes is the Jack player makes a move. So they have to move to an adjacent numbered circle from the one where they are, and they note that down in secret behind their little thing. Then the investigators get their turn, and the first thing they can do is move their investigators, and each one they can stay where they are. They can move one intersection. They can also move 2 intersections. They can move twice as fast as Jack. That's quite important because it allows them to catch him up if he gets past them. After they've done that, each investigator has the option to either look for clues or attempt an arrest. If you look for clues, you call out a numbered circle that's connected to the intersection where you're at. The Jack player looks at their list of places that they have been to so far, and if they have at any point during the game been to that location, or during that round been to that location, they'll say, "Yep, I've been there," and you put a little clear clue marker on it. So that you know that at some point they've passed through, or may actually be on that square. You don't know. It could be, but maybe they weren't there at past. The other thing, and if that's not the case, then you can continue guessing around all the adjacent numbered circles until either you've run out of them or you get one clue marker placed down. The other thing you can do is attempt to make an arrest. You call out a numbered circle that's adjacent to one of the investigator, and if Jack's there, that's it. The investigators win the game. If none of that's happened, then you go to the next round. Jack moves again. The investigators make their move. That's the way it works. What Jack is aiming to do is to do a little tour around the 4... Well, they start in one. They start in one of the discovery locations that they've chosen. So they need to get to the other 3. So they're doing like a little tour of the map. They can do them in any order that they like. They're not committed to, it's not the order you've written them down or anything like that. You choose 4 and you can go around them in any order that you wish. Each round will end when either the investigators discover Jack, that's the end of the game, or Jack makes it to one of the next discovery locations. And then he's got 15 moves in which to do it, which is a very carefully, it's just right, because it's enough to give you a bit of leeway, but it's not enough that you can dick about as the Jack player.
Right.
So they've balanced that pretty well, because it seems like a lot when you're playing it, but then if you start like maybe doubling back or hesitating a bit, suddenly you're counting it and you're like, oh, actually, this is going to be tight. I can't mess about anymore from this point. Yeah, so the aim is to go to all of them. Obviously, if you run out of turns and don't make it to a discovery location, that's a win for the investigators. If you get to a discovery location, that's the end of the round. You clear off all the clue markers. The investigators know where you are, because you're like, you have to call it out. You're like, okay, I've reached a discovery location, so they know where you are. But that's a new round. And so there's 3 rounds. If you get to the 4th discovery location, you win the game. Mm-hmm. And that is basically how it works. It's a bit of a long-winded explanation for what is actually a pretty simple game in
It sounds it. I mean,
in its gameplay.
Does this play quite quickly then, would you say?
Right, well, kind of. One of the reasons they've redone this game, I believe, is one of the first and foremost complaint for Letters from Whitechapel is that it takes too long to play for what it is. And this is definitely... I haven't played Letters from Whitechapel, but I've been through the rules, so I'm sort of fairly familiar with what the differences are between the two. And I can believe that this game is shorter. But for what people have been saying about it, I don't think it's hugely shorter.
Right.
So it's a little bit shorter, but still quite long. It could go 2 hours. It depends who you play with. Playing as the investigators is hard. Playing as Jack is relatively straightforward. In the rulebook, interestingly, it says like the most experienced player should go as Jack. And you can understand why, because if you make a mistake, if you make like an error, like a rules error as Jack, the game is ruined.
Yeah,
when you get to the end and you look over it and you're like, well, you couldn't do that move, then you've maybe wasted your 2 hours or whatever. And that's the reason they say that. But actually, really, the most experienced player or players should take the investigators, because it's way more difficult and way more. You've got a limited number of choices as Jack, because really you're just moving around. And then in addition to making your move, you have 3 types of card that can help you. They're like special powers, and you will need them. It's a big part of the game. One of them is the coach, that lets you move 2 spaces, 2 turns. This is in Letters from Whitechapel, but it also allows you to move through the investigators. So both of those things are a big deal, and you can use it for either or both of those powers. You get 2 of these in Whitehall Mystery. There's the one that lets you go through an alleyway, again, also in Letters from Whitechapel. This is a little bit hard to describe on a podcast, but basically you cut through a block from any number that's on one side of a block of houses. You can go to a number that's connected to that block.
All right, you can see certain ones where there are on the map. There's like obviously a building, and
so
there's something between them.
Yeah, you can hop from any one to the other. Again, that lets you bypass investigators. It also, they can see you've played it, so you put it down. You say, "I'm playing it," and it really does. They're like, "Oh, okay, right. Well, this changes things. Now I have to think a bit more." It's not just a case of counting how many turns there have been since you've moved from the last discovery location.
Getting shades of Captain Sonar there.
Yeah, there is. And the other thing you can do, the new edition, is you can take a boat. There's a bit of the Thames and a little bit of a tributary river on the board, and there are some circles that are adjacent to that. And again, you can move from one of those watery circles to another. So it's a little jump that you can do. And you can use these for bluffing as well. Like you could, for example, as Jack, you could decide to use your boat card rather than crossing the Thames from one side to the other. You might actually just stay in the side you're on and just move from one square to like one that's basically adjacent to it. And then the investigators may assume that you've made a large jump that you haven't. You have to be, especially with these as well, you do have to be really on it playing as the investigators. Because if you make a big mistake, it can, that can really be the end.
Yeah, you can end up on the other side of the board from where Jack is.
Yeah, if you make a massive mistake and you totally go off in the wrong direction, and then the Jack player's like, "I'm at the discovery location," and you're like, "Well, now you're so far away from me," and they're going to keep going to the next one. And you can catch them, but it'll be really, really hard. And the object as the investigator is what you want to do is force Jack to use his special cards. Really, that's what you're trying to do, especially in the first rounds. You want to get him to burn those coach cards so that they don't have them for the last round. And that last round is the one where hopefully the tension will be. However, different from Letters from Whitechapel, this never happens in Letters from Whitechapel, but it has happened in Whitehall Mystery. I've been able to catch Jack in the first round. It does happen.
Seriously?
Yep. And that never happened in Letters from Whitechapel because they tried to make it more thematic, so they wanted this long build.
Yeah.
And there's extra stuff that goes on in that game. You have to select your victim. They've taken all of that out. There was the whole thing of moving the little white pawns about, and you had to choose one as Jack, and the policeman could move around a little bit before the actual game proper, the actual round started. All that's been stripped out of it. It's way more simple now. So there's a wee bit of loss of theme because of that, because this just feels like a wee race, but less murdery. Definitely less murdery.
It sounds way more like Scotland Yard than it does Letters of Whitechapel. In fact, I'm tempted to say this is basically just Scotland Yard in a different.
Scotland Yard has a different system for the tickets, though.
It does have different ticket things, right? And I was going to say that because there are things that you can do in Scotland Yard, and I think Jack has a little bit more flexibility. I think it might be easier to win as Jack in Scotland Yard. Don't quote me on that because it has been a long time since I played it, but I think you do essentially get the same things. Like you do get the tickets that you can spend to move multiple spaces.
Yeah, they are like the coaches.
And it does, yeah. I mean, I think the big difference might be, and again, don't quote me on this, but in Scotland Yard, I think the investigators go on the same spaces as Jack does, whereas in this you're in between the spaces in Whitehall Mystery.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the way when you're sitting describing it, I'm sitting there nodding my head, and the reason I'm sitting nodding my head is because you're just describing Scotland Yard to me, basically. And Letters for Whitechapel, like I say, I played it once with one other person, and it didn't really take me. I think it just felt like they'd thrown too much stuff in there for a game that was essentially just Scotland Yard with more trying to add more and more theme into it, and it didn't work for me that well. I thought that might have been just because I'd only played it with one other person. Maybe playing it with multiple people would have been better, but yeah, I didn't feel the need to go back and play that.
Yeah, I mean the player thing. Letters from Whitechapel was a really popular game with a segment of the sort of gaming population, and a lot of them like to play it 2-player. And I can understand that. I've only played this 2-player, and it works fine as a 2-player game. The only thing you lose, if you play with extra people on the investigators team, the Jack player can listen to what they're thinking because they chat to each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can appreciate that will add an extra, certainly make it a wee bit easier for the Jack player, but it adds an extra dimension to the game that's not there when you play 2-player, unless you sort of talk out loud like I might do. And try and psych out.
You do like to talk out loud.
Talk out my opponent and go, oh.
Maybe I'll go over here.
Yeah, so you're here, yeah? Yeah, I know where you... I would never do that. I'd just go like, oh yeah, well, okay, well, I can see what you're doing now. This works amazingly well. It's like...
One of the other things, and it just got me thinking about this, is this is a weird theme for modern board games now. Like, board games are trying to move into a much more politically correct direction. This is why you don't see games which are about colonisation and stuff like that anymore. But if you do see them, they're like Spirit Island, which are about fighting back against the colonists rather than anything else. Because, like, going back to Puerto Rico, for example, there were some weird things about that game, which, you know, you wouldn't be able to make that game now the way it is.
No.
Because there's some connotations in there that are not nice. And in Whitehall, you're playing one person is playing a prostitute killer who actually existed, like, in the 19th century, and that player is trying to win the game by escaping from the police, and that's a weird thing to me now that they're still making, because Scotland Yard, that was what the game was. Like, you were playing somebody was playing a killer, but that game came out in like the 80s or something, back when these things were not considered to be, like, you know, I don't know what the word is, but, you know, like, they don't make games like this anymore. It's like, if somebody say to you, I've got if you were a board game publisher and somebody says, I've got a game here, one player plays as a prostitute killer, they'd go, get out.
Yeah.
Like, it's just weird that they're remaking this with the same theme over and over and over again.
It's only the fact that it is a sort of historical case rather than a fictional thing that of great renown, and they're not celebrating it, but that allows them to do that. In the original Whitechapel, has a lot of the history in the rule book. It comes with those optional letters that you can use. I quite like that. That seems quite cool. This one, the other thing they've changed, apart from trying to strip it down a bit and make it a little bit shorter, is they have neutered some of that a little bit. It's like I was saying this to Euan earlier. You'll note if you look at the board, it's now the box. It's now blue instead of red. The letters from Whitechapel had red all over the place, and there's like sort of little blood stains and stuff on the board, and the manual is, you know, like drenched in blood, and they've tried to somewhat take some of that away, and you're not overtly killing anybody in this game. They're not murders, these 4 points in the board. They're just locations, and that actually ties up with the Whitehall mystery itself, because it was a single case, a single murder, and they found bits of a dismembered body strewn around, but they have no idea how it happened, or it's still an open case. So, but you know, you're never dismembering anybody in this game as Jack. You're just moving around 4 points in the game. So, but it's still there.
You're allowed to imagine, Dave.
You can. It's slightly weird because
it's all about the choice you.
Exactly.
It doesn't quite thematically make sense, because you're like, why is he? Like,
Just
it doesn't
doesn't
quite tie in with reality.
But this is what I mean. So why are they still making it with that theme, though?
I don't know. The big question. Nobody really knows why they redid it. I think because people liked the game but had a little bit of. There were some complaints about it. Somehow they managed to wangle with Fantasy Flight to allow them to republish this slightly modified version.
It doesn't overtly mention any kind of crime at all, really, does it?
Well, not when you're playing the game. There is lots of stuff in the. There's historical like sidebars in the manual, and they're very interesting to read. You can read about the three investigators they're tailored after 3 characters who were involved in the actual case. Like, one of them was one of them's a policeman, but one's a reporter and one's the police surgeon, and you can read there's excerpts from the police surgeon's autopsy report which you can read in the manual if you wish. So it is there, but when you actually play the game, not so much. It doesn't feel at all like you're doing any murdering in this game. It's not. It's just like chasing around London. So to an extent, they've been somewhat successful if that was their aim. They've kind of managed it. But as I was saying to Chris, interestingly, I found out today it's possible that this game is not going to be reprinted. It's had one print run. There was supposed to be an app to help you randomise your start positions. It's in the manual. It says download the Whitehall casebook. It's not there. There's like a QR code that takes you nowhere supposedly for this app. I don't think that app's coming. I don't know what's happened with these guys in this game, but I think that might be it for the whole Whitechapel, the Whitehall series. Who knows?
It's another one of Fantasy Flight's casualties as well. We're talking about.
They do go through a lot of just things come and go with Fantasy Flight.
I've
if it's not working, they just jettison.
I've inadvertently bought a game that might actually be valuable.
Oh well, that's true actually. Yeah.
It's a shame.
Right.
I think it's good. I like it. It's fun to play, and we've played it.
I mean, I'd be up for
Fair
playing
bunch.
it because it does sound like Scotland Yard, like I say, and I enjoyed Scotland Yard, not so much Letters from Whitechapel. So yeah, I'd be up for giving it a go.
The thing with it is like balancing these games is really, really hard. This is the only thing, and I don't think they've ever successfully managed it. And unless Hunt for the Ring does it, I think that's the other thing they're always trying to do. It's totally dependent on the abilities of the two teams. If one team is way better at the game than the other, it won't work. They'll either lose. Jack will either win really easily or lose really easily, and it totally depends on the people. If you read the reviews, some people are saying this is way too easy for Jack. Other people are saying it's way too easy for the investigators. So it is a wee bit hit.
Well, that's a good sign, I would think.
Yeah, maybe they've got it about right in the middle, but when it works, it's a lot of fun when you get that little bit of tension, and you're both sitting there going, "Oh, yeah."
Okay, so right, we really need to move on. So this game came out last year, 2017.
Yeah, late 2017.
Designer?
Gabriele Mari and Gianluca Santopietro.
So Gabriele Mari, he made several of these games. So he's done Garibaldi. He's the designer of Hunt for the Ring, which is coming this year apparently. Letters from Whitechapel, he did Mr. X and Whitehall Mystery. He's also done a couple other things. I don't know if these are similar things, but one called Storyline and one called Ravenna Fatadarm. So I don't know what that is.
Ravenna Fatadarm?
Yeah.
I actually kind of want to play that now, just purely based on the...
A game about a man with a fat arm. Right, we really need to move on if we're going to squeeze this last minute. So we'll maybe spend about 10 minutes talking about this, because we have talked about it before. So I was on an early episode, like we say.
It's not an overly complicated game.
It's not an overly complicated game, but we did replay Sheriff of Nottingham. It's a game that we sometimes come back to every so often, because I have played this multiple times now. But this is the first time we've played it with 3 people, which I think is the interesting part of it. Because we were kind of 50-50 on whether we were going to do this or not. Yeah. But we were trying to find a game that was going to be quick and fun to play, but could handle 3 people, and we weren't sure if this was going to work with 3 people, but actually it did.
I thought it was quite good.
It worked quite well. So Sheriff of Nottingham, I'm just going to quickly run through how this works. So one person plays as the sheriff every round, so it'll change every round. You play the game through until everybody's been the sheriff twice. Now when you are the sheriff, you are going to be trying to... how do you put this? Stop people from getting contraband through, basically. So the game is basically just a bunch of cards, and everybody has a little pouch, which is just it's a nice little bag, different coloured bags for each player. And the cards have all got, there's 4 different illegal goods that you can try and get past the sheriff, and there's 4 contraband goods that you can try and get past the sheriff. So the legal goods are stuff like apples, cheese, bread, and what's the other one? Chickens. And then you got contraband, which is stuff like silk and crossbows, and I can't actually remember, but yeah, there's 4 different types of those. The contraband is worth way more than the legal goods. The idea of the game is that you get as much money as possible at the end of the game through a combination of having like physical money, which there is coins and stuff in this game, and I'll get to how that works in a second, and the total amount of contraband that you've managed to get through. You'll also get bonus points at the end of the game for being the king of a certain legal good and the queen of a certain legal good, and that's just having the most of that type of good, having got it through. But the main thing about this game is that it's a bluffing game. So what you're actually doing is you've got your little pouch, you've got a bunch of cards in your hand with your different goods in. You will put a bunch of those cards into your pouch and hand it to whoever is the sheriff that round. And you will tell the sheriff what's in that pouch, but you can lie about it. And you will lie about it. For most of the time, you will probably lie about what you've put in there. So the only rules about that is that you have to declare the exact amount of cards that you've got in there. You can't cheat. If you've put 3 cards in, you can't say that there's only 2. You have to say that there's 3, but you have to declare 1 legal good. So I can say to you, and if you're the sheriff, here's my 4 apples in my little pouch. Now, what I might have put in there, I might have put 4 apples in there, but I might have put 2 apples, a crossbow, and a silk in there, because that's worth more money, and I want to try and get that stuff in there as much as possible. Now, once everybody's handed the sheriff their pouches and declared what they've got, the sheriff then has the power over what to do. So everybody starts the game with an amount of money. I think it's 50 coins. The sheriff can say, so if I'm the sheriff, I can say, Euan, these 4 apples, that's not 4 apples. What's in here, Euan? Come on, tell me. And then you can say to me, but sheriff, it's 4 apples. And I say, well, I'm going to open this and have a look at it. And if it's not 4 apples, you're going to have to pay me. Because this is the mechanic of the game. If the sheriff opens your bag and you were telling the truth about your apples, the sheriff has to give you money for that. And that's the rules. And if it's like legal goods, I think it's more. Is it more money if it's legal goods, or is it less money if it's legal goods? I can't remember.
I think it's 2. I think it's 2 gold or.
It's 2 and 4, isn't it?
And it's 4 for 4 that you would have to pay for.
The contraband. That's
yeah.
right, aye. So it's 2 for the legal goods. So if you had 4 apples in there, I'd have to pay you 2 coins for every apple that was in there, I believe. So yeah, you would take a bunch of money off of me. If you had contraband in there, you would have to pay me because I've caught you trying to get contraband through. So you would have to pay me the money for that. But you can offer the sheriff bribes. Now, the pouches have got little button things on them so that you can snap them shut. As soon as the sheriff unbuttons that thing, as soon as he pops it open, that's it, your bag is being inspected. So before he pops that button, you can say, yeah, sheriff, I've got 4 apples in there, and here's 10 coins. Just to say. And then the sheriff has to make a sort of judgment call on whether that 10 coins is worth taking to let you get your whatever contraband's through. But he doesn't know what the contraband is. So the whole game centres entirely around trying to bluff the sheriff and also bribe the sheriff and making promises to the sheriff. You know, you don't just have to give money, you can give the sheriff goods off of your stand, so that's goods that you've already got through. You can say to the sheriff, you can keep all the legal goods that are in the bag. You're allowed to say things like that to him. So yeah, it's I'd say we played it with 3 people. I'd say that it's still better with 4 or 5. For the sole reason that the sheriff can have a field day if there's 4 or 5 people. It can also be it can be overwhelming if you've got 4 or 5 people telling you packs of lies. But also the sheriff can just totally start playing people against each other, just being like, I'll tell you what, you give me 10 coins. Or you can say to the sheriff, I'll give you 10 coins if you don't open my bag, but also if you open his bag, for example. And you can start making weird deals like that with the sheriff. Like, and I'd say that with 3 people, it becomes less. There's less of that sort of interaction between the other players and stuff like that. Because there's less of them, and I think the game slightly loses something out of that. But I still think it worked really well. Even as a 3-player game, because I was very sceptical about it, and actually it worked quite well, and we had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see what you mean with having more people, because it's easier to kind of, I suppose, with the sheriff there, it's easier to sort of bamboozle him basically, and kind of, there's a lot for them to deal with. Because taking you know, sheriff, just you can't. It seems obvious that you're just going to try and smuggle. Everybody's going to try and smuggle contraband through because it's valuable, and it's basically the aim of the game. But you know, you can kind of do things like, you know, you can kind of throw them off a bit and kind of get them, you know, deliberately try and get them to open the pouch and have like a load of just perfectly normal non-contraband goods, and then the sheriff has to pay you a load of money. So there is lots of little curveballs you can kind of throw, and that's what makes the game interesting. It's not just a dry kind of like, right, I'm just, because otherwise you would open every single pack, and it becomes a bit.
It's all mind games.
Yeah.
I mean, I completely screwed you.
Oh, you did. Oh, in the last round,
game.
yeah. Part of me, I was like, this is going to go exactly the way, and I went and did it anyway. I was like, yeah, let's open.
I handed you a bag and I said 5 chickens.
I just couldn't believe anyone would have 5 chickens.
Like, chickens are the most valuable legal good.
That's true. Yeah.
But also, like, it's because it was the last round of the game. It's such a last round of the game thing to do, is to hand the sheriff a bag with 5 cards in it and say, here's 5 such and such. And I was like, and I kept laughing because I just found it hilarious that I was handing you this 5 thing and you were going to think that I was lying, but I was totally telling the truth about what was in there. And then I had to try and convince you to open the bag.
Yeah, well,
because I got more money out of it if you opened the bag. So I was pretending to like try and like I was going to maybe offer you a bribe or something like that, and then I sort of like, well, nah, screw you. Like, I'm not giving you the bribe then if you're going to sit and argue with me again. Blah blah. Open the bag, go for it. You know. And then I made you open the bag.
Daring me to open it.
Yeah, I was goading you into opening it, and then you did, and I ended up making more money. It didn't win me in the game in the end because I got screwed over by the Apple King, I think. But
did you?
Yeah.
All right.
I think Kat had because she had all the apples in front of her. You get more points for being the Apple King than you do being the Chicken King.
Yeah.
Because it kind of reverses. Even though apples are the least valuable good, you get more points at the end of the game for having more of them. So yeah, I think that's what ended up losing me the game, because I was the Chicken King with my 5 chickens that I got through.
You were well into the chickens.
Yeah. Dave, you have played this game before.
Yeah, I have played this.
What do you think about it?
I'm terrible at this game. I remember very well playing it. I remember the first round, I basically filled my little pouch with contraband goods and it went straight through, and that was as good as it got.
Because then nobody trusted you after that.
That was my big success, and then no matter what I did, it always went the opposite way. So whenever I was putting the genuine legal goods through, no interest from the sheriff. And whenever I tried to sneak like one thing through or something in the contraband, yeah, it always got opened. It was just too. It's just, you've got to really play that meta game, I think, that's on top of it. Otherwise, it's just luck.
But you can't game the system. It is purely about the interaction, really.
Oh, it's and that's the thing that's beautiful about this game. I would say it's because it is just the meta game that's important. It's you can't just play the mechanics.
No,
if you play the mechanics, it's boring. It's dry.
That's why I suck at it, because I'm just too lazy. It's like, this cannot be arsed, and so that's why I just don't do that well at these kind of games. But people love this game.
Yes.
Like, people who like it, they love it.
Yeah.
And there's people who play it. I mean, maybe it's getting a bit old now. It's getting on a wee bit, but certainly in the past there were definitely groups of people who were playing this game on a pretty regular basis and going absolutely nuts for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can see why.
Yeah.
If you get the right group of people as well, this is it.
It's fun, and you always play it. I mean, we were playing it the other night, and we were just completely buying into the theatrical sort of nonsense of it, just constantly winding each other up and kind of. And it's just fun to play with folk like that. You instantly just buy into the concept and start mucking about with each other.
I mean, I love being the sheriff in this game. Like, I love it, but like I love. Like, when people hand me their pouches and tell me what's in it, and I just sit there and I'm giving them daggers. I'm just like, what? How dare you lie to me like that? Like,
you've got a role player.
No, but sometimes I'm genuinely feeling it. I'm just like, you lying shit. Like,
you did look like you were taking it personally.
Yeah, but I mean, the good thing, like, I don't take it outside the game.
No,
I'm not then sitting in the pub 2 weeks later and say, remember when you lied to me about those chickens? Like, I don't do that. But while I'm playing the game, yes, I get really into that. But yeah, Sheriff of Nottingham. We're going to have to wrap up the episode now, and I mean, you could talk about things that happened in this game quite a lot, and like the way that the stuff that people lied about, the ridiculous amounts of contraband that somebody got through. Like if Dave getting his 5 contraband items through or whatever it was in the first turn of the game, that would really piss everybody off. So yeah, There are things in this game that you could sit and talk about all night. But yeah, this is still a solid game. I think it's 2014 this came out, but there may have been a version of it before that. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, so it's not that old. I suppose it's getting old now. The way that board games come out thick and fast now, it's something that a year old people have already stopped talking about it. So
yeah, well, this is it. It's not that old, but I think you're absolutely right. It's this cult of the new that's going on at the moment. Like I say, people were really excited about this game at one point, but it's not the sort of thing you hear people enthusing about these days. And I guess it wasn't that long ago, but even to me, it seems ages ago because there's been like
so many games.
How many?
Yeah.
Like everyone's been, this is the next big thing.
The cult of the new thing is definitely a topic that we could spend hours going on about, but we do need to wrap the episode up. I have some strong feelings about that. So yeah, that's Sheriff of Nottingham. That's by Arcane Wonders. The game's designed by Sergio Halaban and Andrei Zatz. Okay, so that's a board gaming episode in the bag, boys.
Nice. And our listeners will be happy.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Aye.
Well done.
I enjoyed that one.
Well done, all.
Thanks, guys.
We should do more of these. Okay, we'll give out our internet. So if you want to email us, you can email us at firstplayertoken@gmail.com. I was about to give out my personal email there. It's like, no, wait, don't say that. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube. We have a Discord, we have a PSN community. So those are all First Player Token or the larger unnecessary First Player Token. The exception, Twitter, is at 1ST Player Token.
Which is once player token.
Thank you, Euan. Our Discord, is discord.me/firstplayertoken. If you go to that, you will get straight into your Discord there. My Twitch username is Unnecessary Chris, if you want to come and watch me. At the moment, I'm just kind of streaming the odd game of Fortnite and a wee bit of Monster Hunter World on the PS4 every so often. I'm not doing regular streams at the moment. Again, reasons for that. I'm not going to go into it. But also, we are part of the Podnose Network.
It's the UK's leading entertainment podcast network.
What's going on there, Euan?
Still going strong. The latest episodes are up after I neglected to upload the last 3, so they're all up there now. Formatting all correct. So check them out, and also check out the many other podcasts on there. The remastered episodes of The Bitter Sound went up today, which I've been meaning to check out because it's a short run series, so there's not too much of a commitment, but it is like it's a pre-written comedy thing, so worth a shot if you're into that sort of thing.
Excellent, thanks very much. Right, we will be back next week and we will be doing a video games episode. If you want to take part in the Retro Games Book Club, we're not going to be doing it next week, but if you want to take part in that, we are going to be playing the original Dune. So go away and play that, and then come email us or talk to us on Discord or whatever, give us your thoughts about it, and we will we'll discuss it on air. But until then, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.